me personally, I actually started in FL Studio when I was 14. I think my mum bought me a laptop, and first thing I bought was FL Studio. And obviously, when I ended up coming to SAE, actually, was because we were doing the production course here, and obviously that's in Ableton. So therefore, made the switch from FL to Ableton, and obviously haven't ever looked back really. I'm still running Ableton 9 because my laptop's like a 2011 MacBook Pro, and my iOS doesn't update. So we still run on Ableton 9. I think they just did Ableton 12. So I think we're running a little bit behind, but it's still like, again, I guess that's another thing, is you don't have to have the latest software or computer. I mean, mine's obviously, it's definitely past its time. It definitely takes a lot longer to get ideas down because you can't run as many things on it. But in a way, it still, makes you hone in on one idea, because if I try and do too many things, it's going to crash your CPU, or it's going to do something where it's just going to lag the computer out. So once you've got an idea down, kind of have to stick with it, which in a way is a blessing in disguise in a way, because therefore I can't expand it too far without it actually having a bad repercussion to the actual song itself, without it not being able to work. But there's Reason as well. Reason is, from what I've heard, is pretty next level from like the people that I've heard that actually use it. But again, that's just, you have Pro Tools and all the other ones as well. What did they have? There's Bitwig and all these other ones as well, that everyone in their own way will tell you that one's better than the other. But in a way, obviously each one has their own specific, I guess, tone to them. Like if same with like a plugin, they all have a similar tone to them. But everyone makes their own way, and each DAW is different. So I think that wouldn't say anyone's better than the other, but I've only ever used FL and Ableton to really test my might. But I mean, I'd like to give it a go on the other ones for sure. In an ideal world, we'd all have a really nice studio with really nice speakers and everything like that. But me personally, I mean, I just run off a laptop and headphones. I've never had the luxury of having a studio at the disposal. And obviously each person will tell you, again, something different, but it's, some people prefer to hear things on monitors. But if you've been using the same headphones for X amount of years, or just a very long time, eventually you'll actually become to use those as a good reference for everything you're doing. Because if you can make it sound good on headphones, that sounds good in general. You don't really need a massive setup to make it something that's worthwhile. You have your go-tos, which is, everyone's like driven into the ground, but, you say your serums. I never really got around Massive, just because, I didn't use it back in the day. And then it was, when Serum came out, everyone jumped on Serum. So that's probably the main, I'd say, tool that you use, or me personally. But again, more or less now, it's probably granular synthesis. Like, you have Native Instruments Form. It's actually a really good granular synthesizer. So you can take like a percussion, or you can take just a sound that you've got from your bank, or even from like Splice or somewhere like that. And you can just run it through a granular synthesis, and you can come up with a million different, not obviously necessarily a million, but many, many different sounds from that one particular sound, just by moving and warping the sound through a granular synthesis. And you can make some really interesting textures and differences that obviously can be really unique, especially in bass music, because obviously, a lot of people do the 4 to the floor thing. And now it's almost, you could class it as almost trying to overproduce if you're using it too much. But it's, in a way, something it can be done quite unique in a way, because obviously not that many people in dubstep anyway, for instance. I mean, there is people that do it, but in a like groundbreaking way, I wouldn't say there's that many. But it's definitely a tool that can be used to maximize potential sounds, 100%. Well, personally, I mean, you want to try and make the best mix you can. Like, because obviously when you're coming to mixing a track, you want to give yourself as much headroom as you can. So you obviously, with your leveling, you're bringing it down. So when not everything's at 0, your first mix necessarily shouldn't be at 0, because that's what you should be doing when you put your master through, just so you can boost it up to where it should be with as much dynamic range as you can. But for someone who doesn't have the tools or the experience, I mean, a lot of people can do their mastering. It doesn't really matter what type of laptop or computer you've got, you can do it yourself. Just me personally, I've had the luxury, as you would say, to have known some very decent people that have worked in some really good places. And they've just always offered, hey, look, if you want to do this, we can pretty much, do some mastering for you if you wanted to. And, you just obviously send them the stems down and, they'll put together a master for you and come back, and you obviously get on a call with them to see if you want to get anything changed. But it's all about reaching out to people. If you think that your mix can be better, because if you're trying to reach out to labels and, big artists that are playing festivals and everything like that, you want your master to be good, because if it's not, that's the first thing they're going to pick up on is your mix and your master. Is like the song could be amazing, but if your mix and master is not very good, it's really not going to go well with them. They're just going to say, have to work on that. So if you have the tools at your disposal, I feel like it's, you're necessary to use them. When it comes to releasing music, I'd say it really depends on how you want to go about it. Like, because you can either stockpile so many releases in a row, or you can have one banging out and just self-release a bunch of music. But when it comes to sending music to like labels or, even just like blogs or anything like that, it's obviously a very time-consuming process. I mean, some labels will take post 6 months to even respond to you to let them know whether they would like it or not. And then after that, it's probably 2-3 months after that you'd actually get the track released. So you're looking at a time frame between 6 and 9 months to 12 months after you've even submitted a demo, if you want to keep it on lock for that long. But it's a process, and obviously to be able to do that, you have to go through the process. You have to have enough tracks to be able to put stuff out and wait for those big releases, unless you're in with the label where you can just send them a message and get a response in a couple of weeks. Every producer will tell you there's something different. So me personally, time management is definitely not one of my best skills, but I would say you try and get at least either an hour a day, because if it keeps, the repercussion, if you keep doing the same thing over and over again, eventually you'll hone in on your craft. Or in my case, usually I'll leave it because I have a day off on Fridays, and that day is either dedicated solely to music, or to, marketing the brand or marketing the music elsewhere, or just production in general. But other than that, time management is always something that you kind of have to space out, because if you don't do it enough and you kind of leave it for a while, you come back to it pretty much not as crash hot as you were before. Organization is obviously a huge thing, especially when it comes to workflow, because workflow will come a part of, you can do it in two different ways. You can do a sound design session just solely for the fun of it and making sounds and generating, different types of, experimentation. Or you can go into the session thinking, I want to make and get an idea down today. Because if you want to get an idea down, you obviously the mixing side of things, you do it along the way, but it's not as important as if you're just making sounds, you're just making sounds. So then eventually when you do go to make an idea, you can just pick and choose and drag and drop into pretty much what you're trying to make. And obviously if you have it all, folded together, where you can just go and I know where I'm looking, I know where certain things are. Obviously your workflow just clicks in a lot quicker, rather than just going, I'm just browsing, looking for things. Try and make your stuff in mono, because stereo is an advantage, right? If you can make it sound good stereo, then, that's great. But if you can make it sound good on mono, because everything like, phone speakers, laptops, cars are stereo, but, that's that. But if you can make a track sound good on a phone, like out of an iPhone or something, it's pretty much going to sound good anywhere if you're doing your leveling right. But because if you do, for instance, if your sub is in stereo and you go to play that on a club system, for instance, he's not going to hear it. So it's very important, especially in bass music, that, subs, you pretty much try and make the mix in mono, because if you try and be too stereo with it, you're going to lose a lot of it when it comes to listening on different devices. Sometimes a reference will sound good somewhere else, but that's where referencing comes in. So when you're making a track, you go test it in your car, you test it on your speakers on your phone, you test it in like a different space just to try and see how it sounds. Because if it sounds different in each different place, you haven't really done it correctly. Like you should be trying to make it sound as good on each different device or surface as you can. That's where the whole mixing comes into it. But that's probably the best tip I would say is try to work in mono, because if you're all stereo, there's repercussions if you don't fix it later.